He'd built his empire on silence. No laughter, no music, no memories allowed. But that night, from the marble hall below, he heard a voice, soft, familiar. A maid humming the song his wife used to sing before she died. His hand froze mid-air. Then his voice, cold and low, echoed through the room. "Bring her upstairs." As we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue in the story. Stephen Thomas hadn't smiled in 3 years. Not since the funeral. Not since he'd watched them lower Elena into the ground while rain hammered against black umbrellas, and his men stood like statues around the perimeter. Not since he'd returned to this mansion, this mausoleum, and locked away every photograph, every piece of jewelry, every trace of her except the one thing he couldn't bury, the memory of her voice. The empire he'd built since then was forged in ice. His enemies whispered that Stephen Thomas had no heart left to target, no weakness left to exploit. He was efficient, ruthless, a ghost who moved through rooms without disturbing the air, who signed death warrants with the same detachment other men used to sign checks. His mansion reflected the man. Marble floors stretched like frozen lakes. Crystal chandeliers hung like icicles. The walls were painted in shades of gray and white. No warmth, no color, no life. 53 rooms, and Stephen only used 3. His bedroom, his study, and the library where Elena's favorite chair sat empty, gathering dust. The staff knew the rules. No music, no singing, no laughter above a whisper. They moved like shadows, completing their duties in silence before disappearing into the servants' quarters. In 3 years, Stephen had fired 11 staff members for violations. The 12th was about to change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October when Stephen's world tilted on its axis. He stood in his third-floor study, reviewing shipping manifests from the port of Newark. Numbers, routes, payoffs. The machinery of his organization required constant attention. His underboss, Vincent Moretti, sat across from him, nursing a scotch and discussing a territorial dispute in Atlantic City. "The Castellanos are pushing again," Vincent said, his Brooklyn accent thick as molasses. "They think because we've been quiet, we've gone soft." "Then remind them why quiet is dangerous," Stephen replied without looking up. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Schedule a meeting. Neutral ground. Make sure—" He stopped mid-sentence. A sound drifted up from somewhere below. Faint, delicate, impossible. Humming. A woman's voice, carrying a melody that Stephen hadn't heard in 3 years. A French song, Edith Piaf. La Vie en Rose, Elena's favorite. The manifest slipped from Stephen's fingers. His entire body went rigid, every muscle locked in place, as if his spine had turned to stone. The sound wrapped around him like phantom hands, pulling him back to their honeymoon in Paris, to Elena swaying in their hotel room, to her voice filling their bedroom on Sunday mornings. "Boss?" Vincent's brow furrowed. "You good?" Stephen's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. "Who's singing?" "I don't hear." "Who is singing?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vincent set down his glass carefully, recognizing the edge in Stephen's voice, the one that appeared right before someone died. The humming continued, oblivious to the storm it had unleashed. It was coming from the east wing, the gallery. Whoever was cleaning down there had no idea that they'd just shattered 3 years of carefully constructed numbness. Stephen moved before conscious thought caught up. He crossed the study in 4 strides, yanked open the door, and stood at the top of the grand staircase. The marble steps curved downward in an elegant spiral, and there, 2 floors below, he could see her. A young black woman in the standard staff uniform. Black dress, white apron, hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was polishing the banister with steady, practiced movements, completely absorbed in her work. And she was humming. That song. That goddamn song. Stephen's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Vincent?" His underboss appeared at his shoulder. "Yeah, boss?" "Bring her upstairs." Mildred Ross had been working at the Thomas estate for exactly 6 weeks. It was the best job she'd had in the 3 years since she'd moved to New Jersey from Mississippi. The pay was exceptional, more than double what she'd made at the hotel downtown. The work was straightforward, clean, be invisible, don't ask questions. She'd heard the whispers about Stephen Thomas, of course, about what he did, about the kind of man who lived in a fortress like this, surrounded by men with guns hidden under expensive suits. But Mildred needed the money. Her grandmother's medical bills didn't pay themselves, and this job meant she could finally afford the good care facility, the one with actual nurses instead of just orderlies who checked in twice a day. So she kept her head down, did her work, and pretended she didn't notice the men who sometimes arrived at midnight, or the way certain rooms were always locked, or the fact that her employer looked like he'd stopped feeling anything years ago. She was humming while she polished, an old habit from childhood. Her grandmother had taught her the song when Mildred was 7, sitting on the porch in Jackson while fireflies danced in the humid summer air. Grandmère had been born in Louisiana, spoke French and English in equal measure, and had filled Mildred's childhood with old Piaf records and stories about New Orleans before the flood. Mildred didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across her. She looked up to find a man she'd never seen before standing 3 feet away. He was broad-shouldered, maybe 50, with slicked-back hair and a face that suggested he'd broken more noses than he'd shaken hands with. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car. "Mr. Thomas wants to see you," he said. Not asked, stated. Mildred's stomach dropped. In 6 weeks, she'd never seen Stephen Thomas up close. He was a distant figure glimpsed through doorways, a silhouette passing by windows. The staff supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had made it clear. If Mr. Thomas addresses you directly, something has gone very wrong. Is there a problem with my work?" Mildred's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Upstairs, now." The man, Vincent, though she didn't know his name yet, gestured toward the staircase with the kind of authority that didn't invite argument. Mildred set down her polishing cloth with trembling hands and followed him up the marble steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did I do? Did I break something? Clean something I wasn't supposed to touch? They climbed 3 flights. The mansion grew quieter the higher they went, as if sound itself was afraid to reach the upper floors. Vincent led her down a hallway lined with closed doors until they reached one at the end, solid oak, ornate, imposing. He knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. "She's here, boss." The study was exactly what Mildred had imagined a mafia don's office would look like. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk the size of her grandmother's hospital bed, leather chairs, and a bar cart stocked with bottles that probably cost more than her annual salary. But what dominated the room was the man standing at the window. Stephen Thomas was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested he'd been an athlete before age, and power had refined him into something more dangerous. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples. When he turned to face her, Mildred's breath caught. He had the most haunted eyes she'd ever seen. Not angry, not cruel, just empty. Like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left only the architecture behind. "Leave us," Stephen said to Vincent. "Boss, I don't think—" "Out!" Vincent hesitated for exactly 1 second, then nodded and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Mildred stood frozen, her hands clasped in front of her apron. Stephen studied her with the intensity of a man examining a puzzle he couldn't solve. The silence stretched so long she almost broke it with an apology. For what she didn't know, but apologizing seemed safer than standing there under that devastating gaze. Finally, he spoke. "What's your name?" "Mildred Ross, sir." "How long have you worked here?" "6 weeks, sir." "Where are you from?" "Jackson, Mississippi, originally. I've been in Newark for 3 years." Stephen moved away from the window, circling around his desk with the deliberate grace of a predator. He didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against the front of the desk, arms crossed, close enough now that Mildred could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the sharp cut of his jaw. "The song you were humming," he said quietly. "Where did you learn it?" Oh God! Her mind raced. Was there a rule against humming? Had she violated some policy she hadn't been told about? I'm sorry if I disturbed you, Mr. Thomas. I didn't realize I was doing it. It won't happen again. I didn't ask for an apology." His voice remained level, but there was something underneath it now. Something raw. "I asked where you learned it." Mildred swallowed hard. "My grandmother. She's in a care facility now, but when I was little, she used to sing it to me. She loved Edith Piaf. She was from Louisiana, and her family was French Creole. So she spoke French, and—" She was rambling. She forced herself to stop. Stephen's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those dead eyes. "What else did she teach you?" "Sir? Songs. What other songs did she teach you?" I don't understand." "It's not a complicated question, Ms. Ross." There was no heat in his words, but they cut anyway. "What other French songs do you know?" Mildred's mind spun. This was the strangest interrogation she'd ever experienced. Non, je ne regrette rien. Sous le ciel de Paris, a few others. Grand-mère had all the old records." Stephen turned away from her abruptly, facing the window again. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet, she almost didn't hear it. "My wife used to sing that song. Used to." Past tense. Understanding crashed over Mildred like a wave. The empty mansion, the rules against music, the way this man moved through his own home like a ghost, haunting the scene of his own death. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I'll never—" "You'll be reassigned," Stephen interrupted. "Starting tomorrow, you'll work as my personal attendant. You'll have access to all floors. You'll take your meals in the staff dining room, but you'll be available whenever I require you." Mildred's breath stopped. What?" "Mrs. Chen will give you the details." He still hadn't turned around. "That will be all." "Mr. Thomas, I don't understand." "That will be all." The dismissal was absolute. Mildred stood there for one more heartbeat, completely lost, then turned and fled the study. Her hands were shaking as she closed the door behind her. Vincent was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "What did he say to you?" He promoted me?" Vincent's eyebrows rose, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "Promoted you?" "I think? I don't—" Mildred pressed her palms against her forehead. "I don't understand what just happened." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and something like pity crossed his face. "Word of advice, sweetheart. Whatever you just became to him, be very careful. Stephen Thomas doesn't change his routine. He doesn't let people in. And if he's making an exception for you—" He shook his head. "Just watch yourself." He walked away, leaving Mildred alone in the hallway outside the study, her heart still racing, her world completely upended. Behind the door, Stephen Thomas stood at his window, staring out at nothing, while something he'd thought was dead forever stirred painfully in his chest. For the first time in 3 years, his home didn't feel quite so silent. The next 3 weeks rewrote the rules of Stephen Thomas's carefully controlled existence. Mildred became a fixture in his life, a presence that was simultaneously unsettling and necessary. Mrs. Chen, the head of household staff, had nearly fainted when Stephen delivered his instructions. Mildred would have access to his private study, his bedroom, the library. She would bring him his morning coffee, organize his papers, and be present during meals. "Is this safe, Mr. Thomas?" Mrs. Chen had asked carefully, her Korean accent thickening with concern. "That's not your concern," was all he'd said. The truth was, Stephen didn't know if it was safe. He only knew that something had cracked inside him the moment he'd heard that song, and Mildred Ross, with her quiet competence and her grandmother's melodies, had become the key to a door he'd welded shut 3 years ago. He told himself it was about the music, that he simply needed someone who understood Elena's songs, who could exist in his space without shattering the fragile equilibrium he'd built. But that was a lie, and Stephen Thomas didn't have the luxury of believing his own lies. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Mildred made him feel human again. It started small. The first morning, Mildred appeared in his study at 6:47 a.m. with a tray bearing a French press of coffee, cream, and 2 sugars. Exactly how he took it, though he'd never told her. She'd simply asked Mrs. Chen. "Good morning, Mr. Thomas," she said quietly, setting the tray on the corner of his desk. Stephen looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing since 4 a.m. She wore the same black dress and white apron as before, but her hair was different, still pulled back, but with small braids woven through it that caught the early morning light. "Thank you." The words felt foreign in his mouth. Mildred nodded and turned to leave. "Wait." She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Stephen didn't know what he was doing. He only knew that the room felt less oppressive with her in it. "Stay while I work. You can—" He gestured vaguely at the bookshelves. "Read, or whatever you'd like." Confusion flickered across her face, but she nodded. "Of course, Mr. Thomas." She settled into one of the leather chairs near the window, pulled a worn paperback from her apron pocket, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and began to read. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was companionable. Stephen found himself glancing up from his work more often than he should, watching the way morning light painted gold across her dark skin, the way her lips moved slightly as she read, the way she was so utterly at ease in a room where most people trembled. After an hour, Vincent knocked and entered for their daily briefing. "Morning, boss. We got word from the Castellanos." He stopped short when he saw Mildred. His eyes narrowed. "I didn't realize we had company." "Continue," Stephen said flatly. Vincent shot Mildred a look that was half suspicion, half warning, then launched into his report about territory disputes, shipment schedules, and a problem with a union steward in Bayonne who needed convincing. Through it all, Mildred kept her eyes on her book, seemingly absorbed in her reading. But Stephen noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her page-turning slowed. She was listening. Of course she was. And she was smart enough to pretend she wasn't. When Vincent left, Stephen spoke without looking up from his papers. "You understand the danger of what you're hearing." "I don't hear anything, Mr. Thomas." Her voice was steady. "I'm just reading my book." The corner of Stephen's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. "Smart woman. I try to be." And just like that, a pattern was established. By the end of the first week, Stephen found himself having conversations. Real conversations, not the tactical exchanges with Vincent or the one-word commands he gave his men. Actual dialogue about books, about Mildred's grandmother's stories from Louisiana, about the weather turning cold and the way autumn painted the estate's trees in fire. "Grandmère used to say October was when the world got honest," Mildred said one afternoon as she organized his filing cabinet. "Summer lies to you with all that green and sunshine. Winter's too harsh to tell you anything. But fall? Fall shows you what's real." Stephen paused in his reading. "That's remarkably philosophical for a season." She was a philosophical woman. Mildred smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. She'd sit on the porch and explain the universe to me like she had it all figured out. Maybe she did. You speak about her in past tense sometimes. Present tense to others. The smile dimmed. "She's in late-stage Alzheimer's. Some days she knows me. Most days," Mildred's hands stilled on the file folders, "most days she thinks I'm her sister, or her mother, or a nurse she knew in 1953. But she's still here, still breathing. So I guess I don't know what tense to use." Something sharp twisted in Stephen's chest. Loss, he understood. Ambiguous loss. The kind where someone was gone but still present. That was a special kind of hell. "How often do you visit her?" "Sundays. It's my day off." Stephen made a note on a piece of paper, slid it into his desk drawer. The next Sunday, Mrs. Chen informed Mildred that her day off would now include a car service to and from the care facility, and that the facility's billing department had received an anonymous payment covering the next year's expenses. When Mildred confronted Stephen about it, storming into his study with fire in her eyes and color in her cheeks, he didn't look up from his work. "I don't accept charity, Mr. Thomas." "Good. That wasn't charity." "Then what was it?" "An investment. Your grandmother's care was causing you stress." "Stress makes people unreliable. I require reliability." His tone was businesslike, detached. "Consider it a benefit of your position." Or consider it a gift from someone who understands what it's like to lose someone slowly. His eyes finally met hers, and the rawness there stole her breath. "Either way, it's done." Mildred stood there, emotions warring across her face. Pride, gratitude, and anger, something else she couldn't name. Finally, she nodded once and left the study without another word. But the next morning, she brought him coffee with a small vase of flowers next to the cup. Marigolds, bright orange against the gray and white of his study. Stephen stared at them for a long time before he called her back in. "What are these?" "Flowers, Mr. Thomas, for your desk." "I can see that. Why?" Mildred met his gaze evenly. "Because everyone deserves a little color in their life. Even you." She left before he could respond. The marigolds stayed, Vincent Moretti had been Stephen's underboss for 8 years. He'd helped build the empire after Elena's death, had stood beside Stephen through wars with rival families, had personally eliminated 3 traitors and negotiated 7 treaties. He knew Stephen Thomas better than anyone alive. Which is why he knew Mildred Ross was dangerous. "You're getting attached," Vincent said one evening as they reviewed security footage from the Newark docks. It was late, past midnight, and they were alone in Stephen's study. To the girl, Stephen's expression didn't change. "She's efficient, competent, that's all." "Bullshit." Vincent drained his scotch. "You've got her up here every day. You talk to her. You smile around her, Stephen. You haven't smiled in 3 goddamn years. Your point? My point is, she's a liability." Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping. "You know what happens when men like us get weak. When we start caring about someone, they become targets, leverage. And you're not just any man. You're Stephen fucking Thomas. Every enemy you've made, every family you've crossed, they're watching for exactly this." Stephen's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of the risks." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're so lost in whatever spell this girl's cast that you've forgotten what the sharks smell. Blood in the water, boss. That's what they're smelling." "She's not Elena." The name hung between them like a grenade. Vincent's face softened, barely, but enough. "No, she's not. But she's making you feel again. And in our world, feelings get people killed. I'm not saying cut her loose. I'm saying be smart. Keep distance. Remember what happened the last time you loved someone." Stephen stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, security lights illuminated the grounds in cold white circles. "I remember every day." "Then act like it." Vincent rose, set his empty glass on the desk. "Because if you don't, I'll have to. That's my job, protecting you, even from yourself." He left without waiting for a response. Stephen stayed at the window for a long time, Vincent's words circling like vultures. His underboss was right, of course. Attachment was my weakness. Caring was exposure. Every moment he spent with Mildred was another piece of ammunition he handed to his enemies. But when he closed his eyes, he could hear her humming in the gallery below, and the silence didn't feel quite so suffocating anymore. He was playing with fire, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't care if he burned. The shift happened on a Thursday night in early November. Stephen had been working late, a meeting with a prosecutor who needed encouragement to lose evidence, followed by a call with their associates in Philadelphia about a shipping route dispute. It was past 2 a.m. when he finally emerged from his study, tie loosened, exhaustion pulling at his bones. The house was dark and silent. The staff had retired hours ago, except there was light coming from the library. Stephen moved quietly down the hallway, drawn by curiosity and something else, a tightness in his chest that felt almost like anticipation. He pushed open the library door. Mildred sat curled in Elena's chair, Elena's chair, the one no one had touched in 3 years, with a blanket draped over her lap and tears streaming down her face. She was reading, completely absorbed, unaware of his presence. "Miss Ross," she jerked upright, the book tumbling from her hands. "Mr. Thomas, I'm sorry, I didn't. I was just. The chair looked so empty, and I didn't think. What are you reading?" Mildred wiped at her eyes, quickly, embarrassed. "Poetry. Pablo Neruda. I found it on the shelf, and I'm sorry. I'll go." "Don't!" The word came out sharper than he intended. Stephen stepped into the room, picked up the fallen book. 20 love poems and a song of despair. Elena's copy. Her notes were still in the margins in faded pencil. This was my wife's. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. She loved Neruda. Stephen's thumb traced the worn spine. She used to read to me, late at night, when she couldn't sleep. He looked at Mildred, really looked at her. You were crying. It's beautiful and sad. Sometimes beautiful things make you cry. Something in her words cracked him open. Stephen found himself moving to the chair opposite hers, the reading chair he'd abandoned 3 years ago, and sitting down. Sitting in this room. In this space that had become a shrine to everything he'd lost. Read to me, he said quietly. Mr. Thomas? Please. Mildred hesitated, then picked up the book with trembling hands. She found her place, cleared her throat softly, and began to read in her warm, honeyed voice. I want you to know one thing. You know how this is. If I look at the crystal moon, at the red branch of the slow autumn at my window, if I touch near the fire the impalpable ash or the wrinkled body of the log, everything carries me to you. Stephen closed his eyes. Her voice washed over him like absolution, like coming home, like Elena's ghost, and something entirely new all at once. When she finished the poem, silence filled the space between them. She would have liked you, Stephen said finally. Your wife? Elena. He opened his eyes, found Mildred watching him with such gentle understanding it hurt. She believed people carried light, that some souls just naturally brightened the rooms they entered. She said it was a gift, one you couldn't fake or learn. You either had it or you didn't. That's a lovely way to see the world. You have it. The words escaped before Stephen could stop them. That light. It's why... He trailed off, unable to finish. Why what? Why I can't stop pulling you closer. Why I'm breaking every rule I made. Why you terrify me more than any enemy ever could. Nothing. It's late. You should rest. But as Mildred rose to leave, Stephen stood as well. They were close now, closer than propriety allowed, closer than was safe. He could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes, could count her breaths. Mr. Thomas. Her voice was barely a whisper. Stephen. The correction surprised them both. When it's just us, call me Stephen. That wouldn't be appropriate. Nothing about this is appropriate, Mildred. Her name on his lips changed something fundamental. The air between them became charged, dangerous. Mildred's breath hitched. I should go. Yes? Neither of them moved. Stephen's hand rose, seemingly of its own accord, and his fingers traced the line of her jaw with excruciating gentleness. Mildred's eyes fluttered closed. This is a mistake, he murmured. I know. I can't promise you anything. Not safety. Not a future. Nothing but complications and danger. I know. Then why are you still standing here? Mildred opened her eyes, and what he saw there, courage, desire, acceptance, nearly destroyed him. Because sometimes the dangerous thing is the right thing. Grand-mère taught me that too. Stephen's thumb brushed across her lower lip. For one heartbeat, for two, they stood on the knife's edge of a decision that would change everything. Then Stephen stepped back, severing the moment. Good night, Mildred. The disappointment in her eyes was a living thing, but she nodded, gathered her blanket, and left the library without looking back. Stephen sank into his chair, and dropped his head into his hands. He was falling, and there was no one to catch him but the woman who'd just walked away. Vincent made his move 3 days later. He'd been watching, calculating, and he'd come to a conclusion. Mildred Ross was a cancer that needed cutting out before she destroyed everything they'd built. He chose his moment carefully, a Monday afternoon when Stephen was in Manhattan meeting with their suppliers. Mildred was alone in the third-floor study, organizing files as she did every afternoon. Vincent entered without knocking. "We need to talk, sweetheart." Mildred looked up, and something in his tone made her straighten. "Mr. Moretti, you're smart, right? That's what I've heard. Smart girl from Mississippi, taking care of her sick grandmother, working hard." He circled the desk slowly. "So I'm betting you understand exactly what kind of danger you're in." "I'm not in any danger." "Really?" Vincent's smile was cold. "You think stepping into a dead woman's shoes is safe? You think making Stephen Thomas care about you is going to end well?" "I haven't done anything wrong." "Haven't you?" He leaned against the desk. "Elena was killed because someone wanted to hurt Stephen. Took her right out of his life like cutting a thread. And you know what the worst part was? She never saw it coming. Thought she was safe because she loved him." Mildred's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave. Tonight. Pack your things, walk away, never look back. I'll make sure you're compensated. Enough to take care of your grandmother for years, but you disappear." "And if I refuse?" Vincent's expression hardened. "Then you become a problem. And I solve problems, Mildred, permanently." Before she could respond, the study door opened. Stephen stood in the doorway, still wearing his coat from the city, his eyes moving from Vincent to Mildred and back again. The temperature in the room dropped to sub-zero. "Vincent!" His voice was soft, deadly soft. "What are you doing in my study?" "Boss, I asked you a question." Vincent straightened, realizing too late that he'd miscalculated. "I was trying to protect you. She's a liability, and you can't see it because you're—" "Choose your next words very carefully." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Vincent looked at Stephen, really looked at him, and saw something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the empty-eyed ghost he'd known for 3 years. This was the man from before Elena's death. The dangerous one. The one who'd built an empire on calculated brutality. And Vincent had just threatened something he valued. "I'm trying to help you," Vincent said, softer now, "like I always have." "By threatening her?" Stephen moved into the room, positioning himself between Vincent and Mildred. "By going behind my back?" "Someone has to think clearly here. You're compromised, Stephen. You're making decisions based on— Get out. Boss, you're done. Collect your things. You have until morning to leave the state." Stephen's words were ice and iron. "If you're still in New Jersey by sunrise, I'll consider it an act of war." Vincent's face went white. "You're firing me? After 8 years? After everything I've done for you? Because of some girl you've known for 2 months? I'm firing you because you forgot who gives the orders." Stephen's hand moved to his waistband, not drawing the weapon there, but reminding Vincent of its presence. "You forgot that loyalty means trusting my judgment, not undermining it. And you forgot that threatening someone under my protection is the same as threatening me." The two men stared at each other, years of partnership and brotherhood fracturing in real time. Finally, Vincent nodded once. "You're making a mistake." "Then it's my mistake to make." Vincent looked past Stephen to Mildred. When this goes bad, and it will, remember I tried to save you both." He walked out, closing the door with unnerving gentleness. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Stephen's shoulders sagged, the confrontation draining something vital from him. He turned to Mildred, and she saw exhaustion in every line of his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You just fired your underboss, your best friend. For me." Her voice shook. "Stephen, I'm not worth—" "Don't." He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. "Don't tell me what you're worth. Vincent saw you as a liability. I see you as the only thing keeping me alive. That's not healthy. No, it's not. But it's true." His forehead touched hers, and Mildred felt him trembling. "I lost Elena because I couldn't protect her. I won't make that mistake again. I won't lose you. You can't promise that. Watch me." And then he was kissing her, urgent and tender and desperate all at once. Mildred melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. 3 weeks of tension and denial and attraction exploding into this single moment of surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Stephen rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "And it terrifies me more than anything I've ever faced." Mildred's breath caught. "I'm already there. I've been falling since you ordered me upstairs." "Then God help us both." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Mildred tasted salt. She couldn't tell if the tears were his, or hers, or both. The next 5 months were stolen moments and held breath. Stephen restructured his organization, promoting Marcus Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew, who'd proven himself ruthless and loyal, to underboss. He tightened security, installed new protocols, prepared for whatever retaliation Vincent might orchestrate. But in the spaces between business and violence, there was Mildred. They were careful, discreet, no public displays, no acknowledgement to the staff beyond what was already known. But in the privacy of his rooms, in the library late at night, in stolen hours before dawn, they built something that felt impossible. Stephen smiled now. Not often, but enough that Marcus commented on it. The mansion felt less like a mausoleum. Mildred brought plants, succulents, and herbs in terracotta pots that sprouted on windowsills. She played music sometimes, Piaf, yes, but also Billie Holiday and Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, and Marvin Gaye. Stephen learned about Mildred's childhood in Mississippi, about her parents who'd passed when she was 19, about her dreams of opening a bookstore one day. She learned about Elena, not as competition, but as part of Stephen's story. About their wedding in a small church in Queens. About her laugh. About how cancer had taken her slowly. And how the rival family, the Rizzos, had sent their final condolences in the form of a car bomb that killed 3 of his men. "I hunted them," Stephen told her one night, lying in his bed with Mildred curled against his chest. "Systematically destroyed their organization. It took 8 months. By the end, there were no Rizzos left." Mildred's fingers traced patterns on his chest. "Did it help? The revenge? No. It just made me more efficient at being empty." "You're not empty anymore." "No." He kissed the top of her head. "You filled all those spaces with light. Like Elena said, some people could. I wish I could have met her. She would have given me hell for waiting this long to move on. She told me once, before she got sick, that if anything happened to her, I had to promise to find joy again. I thought she was being melodramatic." His voice roughened. "I didn't know she was preparing me." They lay in silence, wrapped in each other, pretending the world outside couldn't touch them. But the world always did. It came on a Thursday in early April. Spring had transformed the estate grounds into something almost beautiful. Mildred had convinced Stephen to walk with her that evening, a simple thing. Strolling through the gardens, as sunset painted the sky orange and gold. They were near the fountain when Marcus appeared, running, his face urgent. "Boss, we've got a problem. Vincent's back." Everything froze. Stephen's hand moved to his weapon instinctively. "Where?" "He's at the front gate with 5 cars, armed, asking to talk." "It's a setup," Mildred whispered. "Obviously." Stephen's jaw clenched. "Marcus, get her inside. Secure wing. Lock it down." "I'm not leaving you, Mildred." Stephen turned to her, and his eyes held so much fear it stopped her arguments cold. "Please, I can't do what I need to do if I'm worrying about you. Please." She cupped his face, kissed him hard. "Come back to me. Always." Marcus took her arm, leading her toward the house at a run. Stephen watched until they disappeared inside, then turned toward the gate. Vincent stood on the other side of the iron bars, looking older than Stephen remembered. Thinner. Harder. "You came back," Stephen said, stopping 10 feet from the gate. His men flanked him, 12 to Vincent's 5. The odds were clear. "I had to." Vincent's voice was tired. "I've been thinking about everything. About what I said, what I did. And I was wrong. I was trying to protect you from getting hurt again, but I went about it all wrong. I shouldn't have threatened her, shouldn't have tried to force your hand." He spread his arms. "I'm not here for war, Stephen. I'm here to apologize, to come home." Stephen studied his former friend, searching for the lie, the trap. "What changed?" "I've been watching, waiting for this thing with Mildred to blow up in your face, for her to betray you, or for your enemies to make their move. But none of that happened. You're not weaker. You're stronger. And I finally realized," Vincent's voice cracked, "I realized I was jealous. You found your way back to life, and I've been stuck in the same dark place we were 3 years ago." The confession hung between them. Stephen wanted to believe. God, he wanted to. "If I let you back in," he said carefully, "you fall in line. Mildred is off limits, non-negotiable." "I understand. I swear, Stephen, on everything we built together." Stephen hesitated for 5 long seconds, then nodded to his men. "Open the gate." The iron bars swung wide. Vincent stepped through, arms still spread, moving slowly. He was 3 feet from Stephen when everything went wrong. Vincent's hand flashed to his back waistband. Drawing a compact pistol with practiced speed, aimed not at Stephen, but past him toward the house, toward the window where Mildred's face had appeared, watching. Stephen moved on pure instinct. He threw himself sideways, tackling Vincent as the gun fired. The bullet went wide, shattering marble. They hit the ground hard, and then it was chaos. Stephen's men opening fire on Vincent thrashing beneath Stephen, trying to bring the gun around. Stephen's hand closed around Vincent's wrist, slamming it against the pavement once, twice, until the weapon skittered away. His other hand went to Vincent's throat. "You tried to kill her," Stephen hissed, his face inches from his former friend's. "After everything. After I warned you." Vincent's face was purple, veins bulging. "Had to stop you from making the same mistake." "She wasn't the mistake. You were." Stephen's hands tightened. Vincent's eyes bulged, his body spasmed. And then, nothing. Stephen held on for 10 more seconds, making absolutely certain then let go and rolled off the corpse. Around him, the firefight was over. 4 of Vincent's men were dead. 1 was wounded, being restrained by Marcus. The gate area looked like a war zone. Stephen stood slowly, his suit torn, his hands shaking. And then Mildred was there. She must have run down, ignored all the protocols, throwing herself at him, her hands frantically checking him for injuries. "Are you hurt? Stephen, talk to me. I'm fine." His arms came around her, crushing her against his chest. "I'm fine. You're fine. It's over." "He tried to kill me. I know." "You killed him." "I know." Mildred pulled back enough to look at his face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry. I know he was your friend. He stopped being my friend the moment he pointed a gun at you." Stephen kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I meant what I said. I won't lose you. Not to Vincent. Not to anyone." Marcus approached carefully. "Boss, we need to clean this up, and we need to move. If Vincent came back, others might try." "I know." Stephen's mind was already working, calculating. "Double the security, get our contacts at the NYP to handle the scene. And Marcus?" "Yeah, boss. Thank you for keeping her safe." Marcus nodded once, then started barking orders to the men. Stephen held Mildred for another moment, letting his heart beat slow, letting himself believe they'd survived. "Take me inside," Mildred whispered. "Just hold me. Please, for the rest of my life." They walked back to the house together, stepping over the wreckage of Stephen's old life to reach the new one waiting inside. October came again, painting the estate in autumn's honest colors. The mansion was different now, warmer. Music played in the mornings. Sometimes Piaf, sometimes Cook, sometimes newer artists that Mildred liked. The staff smiled more. Plants thrived in every room. Stephen Thomas, still dangerous, still powerful, still feared, had remembered how to laugh. He stood in the library, watching through the window as Mildred walked the gardens with her grandmother. They'd moved Grandmère to a private suite in the East Wing 2 months ago when her facility could no longer provide adequate care. The old woman didn't always remember where she was, but she remembered the songs. She and Mildred sang them together, their voices drifting up through the autumn air. Marcus entered, holding a folder. "The Castellanos accepted your terms. No more territory disputes." "Good." Stephen didn't turn from the window. "And the last of Vincent's associates have been handled." "Good." Marcus hesitated. "You're different, boss. In a good way, I think. But different. Love does that." "Yeah, I'm figuring that out." Marcus grinned. He'd been dating one of the day staff, a development that would have been unthinkable in the old days. For what it's worth, I think Elena would approve. Stephen finally turned, and Marcus saw something in his eyes that made him understand why Mildred had stayed, why she'd chosen this life despite all its darkness, hope. "I think she would too," Stephen said softly. That night, Stephen and Mildred lay in their bed. It was their bed now, no longer just his, with the windows open to let in the October breeze. "Grandmère told me something today," Mildred said, her head on Stephen's chest. "She was lucid for about an hour. It was good." "What did she say?" "She said she'd been praying for me to find someone strong enough to handle my light. That she was glad she lived long enough to meet you." Mildred's fingers traced patterns on his skin. Then she sang La Vie en Rose and told me that's what I look like now. Like I'm seeing life through rose-colored glasses. Are you? No. Mildred propped herself up, looking down at him. I see it clearly. The danger, the complications, your world. But I also see you, and that makes everything worth it. Stephen pulled her down, kissing her with the kind of tenderness that still surprised him. When they broke apart, he reached to the nightstand, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small velvet box. Mildred's breath stopped. I'm not good at this, Stephen said, his hands steady, even though his voice wasn't. I lost one wife, and I swore I'd never risk that pain again. But you're teaching me that some risks are worth taking, that some people bring enough light to justify the darkness. He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. Marry me, Mildred. Let me spend the rest of my life earning the grace you've given me. Tears spilled down Mildred's cheeks. Yes, God, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because Stephen Thomas never did anything halfway. And then they were kissing, laughing, crying, tangled together in the sheets. Outside, autumn wind carried the scent of chrysanthemums and change. Inside, a man who'd been dead for 3 years was finally, fully alive again. And somewhere in the East Wing, an old woman smiled in her sleep, dreaming of New Orleans and old songs and the granddaughter who'd inherited her gift for bringing light to dark places. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comment below. If you love this story of survival, protection, and unexpected love, subscribe to our channel for more dark romance tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support helps us create more content like this. Thank you for being part of community.